In the endless ice of Alaska, a squad of soldiers was sent on a mission the Army swore never existed. What they found buried in the snow was not human, and none of them ever came back to tell the full story. The story begins in the dead cold of Alaska, sometime in the late 1950s, when the Cold War was at its sharpest edge. On paper, America and the Soviet Union fought with spies, rockets, and politics. But far from the cities, hidden in frozen wilderness, no one dared to map. A different kind of war was being played, a war of secrets. That's where the mission began, buried under layers of classified stamps, signed orders, and sealed lips. The men chosen for it weren't the youngest recruits or the softest bodies. They were seasoned soldiers. Veterans of Korea, Arctic specialists, men who could survive on ice, ration a meal for 3 days, and march through storms without a word of complaint. These were the ones handpicked for something no ordinary unit was supposed to face. The briefing was short. A wooden table, a cold room, a commander with a face carved from stone. No details were given, no explanations, just a map with a red circle drawn over an empty patch of white on Alaska's northern frontier. Their objective, secure and investigate. The officer's voice was flat, clinical, like he was reading a grocery list. But his eyes betrayed something else. A twitch when he handed them the file. A hesitation when he looked at the red circle. One soldier later swore that the officer Stiss' last words stuck with him more than the orders themselves. You may not all return. Some things out there are better left buried, but Washington wants answers. So, they packed their gear, heavy winter coats lined with fur, rifles slung across their backs, and rations enough to last weeks in the wild. They were told not to speak of the mission outside their unit. Even among themselves, some chose silence. That's the kind of order that makes men nervous. You can follow any command when it comes with clear reasons, but when the reason is hidden, the mind begins to wander. The journey north was brutal from the first step. Snowfields stretched endless, white horizons merging into gray skies until no man could tell ground from air. Their boots crunched into ice that swallowed sound. The cold was not just cold, it was a living thing, gnawing through their gloves, biting deep into skin, slowing breath until every inhale burned like fire. For the first 2 days, spirits remained steady. They joked to mask the silence, cursed the weather, and grumbled about the food. That's what soldiers do. But on the 3rd day, the strange things began. First, the compasses. One moment the needle pointed north, steady and true. The next, it spun wildly in circles, as if some invisible magnet was twisting the world itself. Their radios followed soon after. One by one, they began to cut in and out, voices reduced to static, signals vanishing the deeper they marched. The commander blamed solar flares, but no man believed him. They knew something wasn't right. Even the air felt strange, heavy, charged, as if a storm waited just over the horizon. Yet the skies above remained clear. It was then that some soldiers began hearing things. At first, it was only 1 or 2 men claiming faint whispers in the wind. Not words exactly, but tones, like the murmur of voices too far away to catch. Others said they heard footsteps pacing them just out of sight, crunching softly in the snow, though no one was there. By the end of the first week, laughter had stopped. No more jokes, no more grumbling. The men marched in silence, watching the land, watching the shadows, watching each other. One night, around their small fire, a private finally spoke the question everyone was holding back. "Sir, what exactly are we walking into?" The commander didn't set answer at first. He poked the fire with a stick, sparks crackling upward into the black sky. Then, with his jaw tight, he muttered, "It's Seps, not the Soviets. That's Seps, all you need to know." The silence after that was worse than the cold. They pressed on, deeper into the wilderness, where even the maps turned blank. Locals never settled there. Hunters refused to track game that far north. Not even wolves howled in those forests. The land felt abandoned, or worse, watched. The men grew restless. One carried a photo of his wife tucked inside his coat, pulling it out at night as if her smile could protect him. Another scribbled in a notebook, writing letters to his mother he knew he'd never send. A third carved small crosses into wood with his knife. stacking them like tiny gravestones. Each man carried his fear differently, but none spoke of it aloud. Finally, after days that felt like weeks, they reached the point on the map. But there was nothing ordinary waiting for them. No Soviet camp, no secret base, no sign of life at all, just an unnatural formation of ice and rock, towering above the snow like the broken ruins of some ancient monument. It wasn't shaped by nature. Every soldier knew that the instant they laid eyes on it, the edges were too sharp, the angles too deliberate. Carvings marked the stone, half buried in frost. Strange symbols that didn't belong to any language they'd ever seen. One of the sergeants swore he saw light flicker deep inside a narrow opening, a faint glow like fire far underground. Another whispered that he could feel heat pulsing faintly from the entrance, though the air outside was freezing. The commander didn't hesitate. He pointed toward the mouth of the cavern and barked the order, "Secure the site, move in." But some men hesitated. They said the air near the entrance felt wrong, heavy and thick like breathing water. One even refused to step closer, his boots planted in the snow. "This place, it doesn't want us here." He was silenced quickly. Orders were orders. Still, as they prepared to descend into the black, every man felt the same truth in his gut. This was no mission against Soviet spies, no reconnaissance of enemy bases. This was something else, something older, something waiting. And the deeper they went, the less likely any of them would ever come back. The soldiers stood before the black mouth of the cavern, its entrance wide enough for two men to walk shoulder to shoulder, yet dark enough that no light dared escape. Snow piled in drifts against the rocks, but inside the air carried no frost. It was warmer, unnaturally so, as though the cave itself exhaled heat from deep below. One man tested the edge of the entrance with a gloved hand. He jerked back instantly. The stone was warm, almost burning through his frozen leather. He cursed under his breath. Nobody spoke after that. The commander gave the order, and the first team advanced. Flashlights cut into the dark, beams bouncing off damp stone walls. The echoes of their boots made it sound like there were more than 12 of them inside. Every step doubled, tripled, until it felt as though something unseen marched beside them. For the first 100 yards, the passage sloped gently down, walls narrowing, roof dripping with slow drops of water that tapped against stone. The sound carried like whispers. Some men swore the drips formed patterns, almost like words. The deeper they went, the stranger the air became. It wasn't just warm anymore. It pulsed, like breathing. Some described it as standing beside a furnace. Others said it felt like being inside a giant's chest, each inhale and exhale shaking the earth beneath their boots. Then came the carvings, symbols etched into the walls, deep and sharp, as if carved by hands with tools harder than steel. Strange lines intersected with circles, spirals twisted into jagged patterns, shapes that shifted if you stared too long. One soldier muttered that they looked like maps, but not of land or sea. Maps of something else. The commander ordered silence, but the silence itself became unbearable. Every man heard it, the faint sound of movement somewhere below, not rocks falling, not animals. Something alive. They pressed further. At intervals, the tunnel opened into wider chambers, circular rooms with ceilings lost in darkness. In the first chamber, they found bones, not animal bones. Human, some scattered, some arranged deliberately in spirals across the stone floor. A skull with its jaw cracked open stared at them from the center, teeth chipped and blackened as if burned. One soldier gagged. Another made the sign of the cross. The commander told them to move on. His voice was firm, but his eyes betrayed him. He was afraid too. Deeper still, the air grew heavier. Their flashlights dimmed, batteries draining far faster than they should. One by one, beams of light began to flicker, forcing men to tighten their formation. Without the glow, they would be swallowed whole by the dark. That sips when the first voice came. At first it was faint, like a child whispering from far away. But as they descended further, the voice grew clearer. It called names. The names of the soldiers themselves, one by one. Davis, Carter, Mitchell. Each man froze when he heard his name echo out of the black. Some shouted back, demanding to know who was there. Others shook their heads and pressed on, refusing to acknowledge it. The commander ordered them forward, but now every step felt heavier. Men began to lose their balance, stumbling as though the ground shifted beneath them. A strange vibration hummed through the stone, low and steady like the beating of a giant heart. Hours seemed to pass. Nobody could tell how long they had been underground. Watches had stopped ticking, frozen on the hour they entered the cave. One soldier muttered, "Time doesn't work here." No one argued. Then, at last, they reached the central chamber. It was vast, larger than any cathedral, the roof stretching into darkness too high for their lights to reach. In the center stood a structure that no man expected, a black stone altar, massive and carved with the same symbols they had seen on the walls. It was covered in cracks glowing faintly red, as if something beneath was burning, trapped inside the rock. And around it were bodies, dozens of them, some in rags too old to identify, others in torn military uniforms from wars long past. All were arranged facing the altar, as though they had died while kneeling in worship or in fear. The soldiers froze. None dared step closer. Even the commander hesitated. His orders had been to secure the site, but what they faced was no Soviet bunker, no enemy hideout. This was something older, something unholy. Then the sound returned. Not whispers now, but chanting. Deep, guttural tones rising from the very stones, vibrating in their chests. The altar's cracks glowed brighter with each chant, red light bleeding across the chamber walls like veins. One soldier snapped. He screamed at the others, insisting they turn back, insisting this was not their fight. He tried to run, but before he reached the tunnel, he collapsed, clutching his chest. His body twisted violently, bones cracking under his skin. By the time the others reached him, his eyes were black pits, and he was gone. The unit panicked. Rifles were raised, men shouting over one another, trying to decide whether to fight or flee. But what could they fight? The enemy was not flesh and blood. It was the cave itself. The commander, desperate, barked the order to destroy the altar. Explosives were set, charges planted around the black stone. But the closer they worked, the more violent the chamber became. The chanting grew deafening. The red light turned blinding, and the ground shook so hard the men could barely stand. When the explosives detonated, the blast tore through the cavern, smoke and fire roaring outward. For a moment, silence returned. The altar cracked, split open, its glowing veins spilling light like molten lava. But the victory was short-lived. From the broken altar came a sound, a scream not human, not animal, but something ancient, furious, and alive. It rolled through the chamber, through the tunnels, through the very bones of the soldiers, shaking them to their cores. Then the lights went out. Every flashlight, every flare snuffed out in an instant. The men were swallowed by complete darkness, and in that black, they heard movement. Heavy, wet, dragging movement. Something was free. One by one, the soldiers opened fire, muzzle flashes lighting fragments of the chamber. Shadows moved across the walls, too fast, too large to belong to any creature they knew. Screams echoed, men being dragged away, rifles clattering on stone. The commander shouted for retreat, but the tunnel they came from was gone. The rock had shifted, sealed shut. There was no way back, no escape, only the darkness. And in that darkness, Alaska's forbidden mission turned into a tomb. Gunfire lit the cavern in stuttering flashes, but each burst of light only made the horror worse. Shadows flickered across the walls, shadows that didn't belong to the soldiers. Long arms, twisted shapes, things that darted out of sight before the eye could adjust. The noise was deafening. Bullets sparked against stone. Men shouted over each other, voices cracking with fear. Someone screamed a prayer. Someone else cursed the commander for ever bringing them here. And then, silence. The shooting stopped, not because they ran out of ammunition, but because the creature or creatures had vanished. The soldiers stood in a circle, backs pressed together, rifles trembling in their hands. The only sound left was their ragged breathing and the low groan of shifting stone above. "Where is it?" one man whispered. His voice carried too far in the dark, as if the cavern itself repeated it. No one answered. Then came the scratching, a faint scrape, like claws dragging across rock. First behind them, then above, then below. The sound was everywhere at once, circling them. One soldier snapped. He fired blindly into the black bullets ricocheting off stone. Sparks flew, illuminating the chamber, just enough to reveal something moving along the walls. It was massive, crawling on all fours or maybe six. Its body was slick, wet, and glistening, but its head was wrong. Too long, too sharp, too many eyes reflecting in the muzzle flashes. Before anyone could react, it lunged. The first man it grabbed didn't even scream. One moment he was there, the next he was gone, dragged into the dark with a sickening crunch of bones. His rifle clattered to the stone floor, still hot from firing. Panic erupted. Men ran in every direction, some tripping over the bones scattered around the altar, others smashing into the walls trying to find an exit that no longer existed. The commander barked orders, his voice breaking under the chaos. "Stay together. Stay." Something hit him mid-sentence, knocking him flat. His helmet rolled across the floor as he struggled against claws pinning him down. Two men rushed forward, firing at the shape on top of him. Their shots hit, but instead of blood, a black mist hissed out of the creature's wounds. It recoiled, not dead but angered, its eyes burning brighter in the dark. The commander scrambled back to his feet, pale and shaking. "We can sit, kill it," he muttered. "We can sit." But there was no time to finish. The chamber shook violently, as though the entire mountain had come alive. Chunks of stone fell from the ceiling, smashing into the floor. One struck a soldier's shoulder, breaking bone and sending him screaming to the ground. He crawled away, sobbing, begging for help. But in the next second, the shadows swallowed him too. The survivors regrouped around the altar, their backs to the glowing cracks. The red light cast their faces in a ghastly glow, every expression twisted with terror. They fired in bursts, trying to hold the thing at bay, but it seemed to melt into the walls, appearing wherever their guard was weakest. Then came the voice again. It was not the whisper from earlier. This time it was louder, deeper, echoing directly inside their skulls. Words they didn't understand, but the meaning was clear. Hunger, hatred, possession. One soldier dropped his rifle and clutched his head, screaming as the voice consumed him. He thrashed violently before going limp, his body collapsing into the dirt like a puppet with its strings cut. Another soldier leaned over him, shaking him, trying to wake him up. The man's eyes snapped open. They weren't his eyes anymore. They glowed faint red, veins crawling across his face. With a strength that wasn't human, he snapped the neck of the man kneeling over him. The others opened fire again, but it was too late. Their brother in arms had become something else. The commander made a choice then, a desperate one. He shouted for everyone to fall back into the side tunnels. "We can sit, fight it head on," he roared. "We sit, lose ourselves too." The survivors ran, flashlights barely working. They scrambled through the side passages, ducking under low ceilings, splashing through black water that reeked of rot. Behind them, the creature's movements echoed louder and louder, dragging claws against stone, breaking through walls as if they were paper. They stumbled into another chamber, smaller, circular, lined with more of those carved symbols. But this room was different. At its center lay a pit, perfectly round, descending into blackness, so deep their lights couldn't find the bottom. Heat blasted from it, waves of suffocating air that smelled like sulfur and ash. The soldiers collapsed around the pit, exhausted, terrified, half out of ammunition. They knew this wasn't safety. It was only another trap. One of them, shaking uncontrollably, muttered, "We never should Seth come here. This isn't set a mission, it sets a grave." The commander looked at him, and for the first time, he didn't disagree. His hands trembled as he reloaded his rifle. Though he knew bullets meant nothing anymore. The scratching grew louder. The walls themselves seemed to crawl, symbols glowing faintly red, pulsing like veins feeding into the pit. The voice returned, stronger than ever. This time, it didn't call their names. It commanded. "Join, kneel, serve." The men covered their ears, but it was useless. The words lived inside their minds now, burrowing deeper with every passing second. Then came the sound from the pit, not just wind, not just heat, but movement, heavy, wet, rising movement. Something far larger than the creature in the main chamber was climbing up from the depths. The ground trembled, rocks split, the air became unbearable, thick with sulfur and dread. The soldiers stared at the pit in horror, and one whispered the words that would haunt the last survivors until their dying breaths. "This isn't Set the Beast, this is its prison." And with that, the true nightmare began to rise. The heat pouring out of the pit grew unbearable, as if the soldiers were standing at the mouth of a furnace. Sweat poured down their faces, soaking into uniforms already stiff with blood and dirt. The air tasted like ash, bitter and choking, every breath cutting their throats raw. Then the sound came again, deep, guttural, and heavy. Not the scratching of claws this time, not the skittering of something crawling across the walls. This was deeper, slower, a weight pulling itself upward from a place no man should ever see. The soldiers staggered back from the pit, rifles raised though their hands trembled too much to aim. One of them whispered a prayer, his voice breaking. Another muttered that he'd rather take his chances with the freezing Alaskan wilderness than stand another second near that hole. But the tunnel behind them was already collapsing. Stone groaning, dust pouring down in clouds thick enough to choke. There was no going back. The commander tried to steady his men. His voice shook, but he forced it out anyway. "Hold your ground," he barked. "No matter what comes out of there, we stand together." No one believed him. They could hear the fear in his tone just as clearly as they could hear the monstrous weight climbing closer, closer. Then came the first glimpse. At the very edge of the pit, a hand, or something like a hand, gripped the stone. Its fingers were long, far too long, each ending in claws that screeched against the rock. The flesh was pale, stretched tight over bones that looked more ancient than human. Symbols, the same ones carved on the walls, burned faintly into its skin, glowing red as if branded there by fire. The soldiers opened fire instantly. Bullets cracked through the chamber, echoing in endless ricochets. Sparks flew. The stench of gunpowder mixed with sulfur. The hand jerked but didn't let go. A second one appeared, slamming down beside it, claws gouging deep into the stone. And then, with a sound like a mountain splitting, it pulled itself higher. The head rose first, elongated, skull-like, with too many teeth gleaming in the firelight from below. Rows upon rows like a shark's jaw that never ended. Its eyes glowed faintly, but they weren't bright like an animal's. They were dull, ancient, tired, and furious. The men screamed as they fired, emptying magazines into its face, its chest, its arms. Each bullet sank into flesh, but did nothing. Black mist poured from the wounds instead of blood, swirling in the chamber, choking them further. One soldier broke completely. Dropping his weapon, he ran for the wall, clawing at the stone, desperate to find a way out. He didn't make it 3 steps before the creature's hand lashed out, faster than anything that big should move. It grabbed him, lifted him high into the air, and with one motion, crushed him like he was nothing more than paper. His body fell limp, twisted beyond recognition, before vanishing into the pit below. The others kept firing. The commander shouted for grenades, for anything that could slow it down. A man pulled the pin and hurled one into the pit. The explosion shook the room, rocks raining down, smoke filling the chamber. But when it cleared, the creature hadn't retreated, it had climbed higher. Its chest was visible now, ribcage sharp and unnatural, glowing from within as if fire burned inside its body. Each breath it took rattled the walls, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. Then it spoke. The voice wasn't Set sound. It wasn't Set a roar or a growl. It was inside their skulls, rattling their bones, tearing at their sanity. 1,000 whispers overlapped, rising into one command. Kneel. The men dropped to their knees, not out of choice, but out of force. Their muscles betrayed them, trembling as if strings pulled from above. Rifles clattered to the floor, helmets slid from their heads. Even the commander fought against it, teeth clenched, veins bulging on his neck. But slowly even he sank, knees pressing into the dirt. One soldier, younger than the rest, cried out. Tears streamed down his face as he begged, "Please, don't he make me, don't he?" The creature's eyes shifted to him, glowing hotter, brighter. The boy's body convulsed. His mouth opened wide in a scream, but no sound came. Only smoke poured out, black and endless, spilling from his lips until his chest caved in, hollow and empty. The others could only watch, powerless, as their brother-in-arms collapsed into ash. The commander forced himself upright again, shaking violently. His voice broke as he shouted at his men. "Resist it, Don Set, give in." But the creature only laughed, or something like laughter. It was a deep, grinding rumble that cracked the walls, sent stalactites shattering from the ceiling. It pulled itself higher still. Its full torso rose above the pit, towering over them, each breath a furnace blast. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, pulsing in rhythm with its heart, as though the entire mountain beat in sync with it. The men were breaking. Some sobbed uncontrollably. Others stared blankly, eyes empty, their minds already shattered. Only a handful still gripped their rifles, though what good they could do was anyone's guess. The commander knew it too. His jaw tightened as he looked at the pit, at the beast, at his men. Then he pulled a small object from his pack, a signal flare. He struck it against the rock. The chamber blazed in red light, casting the creature's face into horrifying detail. Its skin was cracked like stone. Its teeth stretched wider than its skull should allow. Its eyes locked onto the flare, and for the first time it recoiled. The commander realized something in that moment. It wasn't bullets or grenades that weakened this thing, it was light. "Flares," he shouted. "All of you, use your flares." The men fumbled through their packs, striking flares, igniting red fire one after another. The cavern glowed with searing light. The beast roared, not inside their heads this time, but out loud, a deafening, earth-shattering sound that shook dust from the mountain above. It tried to shield itself, claws covering its face, but the light seared its skin, burning deep cracks into its body. For the first time, it looked vulnerable. Hope flickered in the soldiers' eyes. Maybe, just maybe, they had found a weapon. But hope didn't last long. The pit exploded. A wave of heat and force knocked the soldiers backward, extinguishing half the flares instantly. The remaining light flickered weakly as the beast let out a roar so powerful it felt like the entire world split open. And then the voice returned, stronger, louder, unstoppable. "You are mine." The mountain trembled, the chamber cracked, and the men realized with dawning horror this wasn't just one creature. This was a gate, and it was opening. The mountain shook like it was alive, dust pouring down in choking clouds as the cavern split wider. The flares flickered, their weak light struggling against the endless dark that surged from the pit. The beast loomed above them, its claws tearing grooves in the stone, its eyes burning brighter with each pulse of red symbols carved into the walls. And then the soldiers understood, this wasn't the creature's prison, it was its doorway. The gate was opening. The commander screamed for his men to move, his voice nearly lost under the thunder of shifting rock. "Out! Out! Now!" His words cracked with panic, a sound the soldiers had never heard from him before. But instinct told them he was right. Whatever had awakened in this tomb wasn't meant for human eyes. If they didn't escape now, none of them ever would. They ran. Boots hammered against the stone floor, echoing through the cavern as the flares sputtered out one by one. The tunnel stretched before them, dark and narrow, but it was their only chance. Behind them, the beast bellowed, a roar that made the walls tremble and the air throb inside their skulls. One soldier stumbled, his leg, already frostbitten and weak, gave out beneath him. He screamed for help, clawing at the ground as the others surged past. The commander turned back, reaching out to grab his hand, but before he could pull him up, a claw lashed through the darkness. The soldier was gone, ripped backward into the pit's glow. His scream cut off as abruptly as if it had been swallowed by the earth itself. The men didn't dare look back again. The tunnels twisted and split, just as they had on the way in, but now the markings on the walls glowed faintly, almost as if guiding them. Some swore they saw faces shifting inside the carvings, eyes that blinked, mouths that whispered, But they pushed forward anyway, desperate to put distance between themselves and the pit. The deeper they ran, the more the air itself fought against them. It grew heavier, pressing down on their chests, each breath a battle. Some soldiers collapsed to their knees, clutching at their throats as invisible hands seemed to squeeze the life from them. Others staggered onward, dragging their comrades by their vests, unwilling to leave anyone behind even as terror clawed at their sanity. Then the whispers returned, not from the walls this time, from inside their heads. Turn back. The light cannot save you. The gate is open. The words overlapped, hundreds of voices, all identical and yet distinct, all speaking in perfect unison. The soldiers clutched their helmets, trying to block them out, but it was useless. The voices weren't outside, they were inside. One man broke. Dropping his rifle, he turned around, eyes wide and glassy. "We can't run," he gasped. "It's calling us back. We belong to it." He tore off his vest, stripped away his gear, and staggered back down the tunnel toward the glow. The commander reached for him, shouting his name, but another soldier grabbed his arm. "Leave him. We can't save him." And so they did. His shadow vanished into the red light, his voice joining the whispers until it was impossible to tell them apart. The tunnel grew narrower, rocks splintering and cracking as if the mountain itself was trying to close in around them. The soldiers crawled now, scraping their hands raw on jagged stone, pushing through dust and rubble that burned their lungs. Behind them, the roars grew fainter, but never silent. The beast wasn't chasing them. It didn't need to. It knew the mountain would finish the job. Finally, after what felt like hours, they burst into a wider chamber. For a moment, hope surged in their chests. They recognized the markings, the path they had taken on the way in. The surface was close. They could almost taste the freezing air outside. But hope shattered as quickly as it came. In the center of the chamber lay the bodies of the men they had lost earlier. The soldier who had vanished into the darkness, the one crushed by the creature's claw, the one dragged screaming into the pit. They were all here, their corpses arranged neatly in a circle, eyes open and glowing faintly red. The soldiers froze, horror rooting them in place. None of the bodies bled. None bore wounds. It was as if the mountain itself had carried them here, placing them like offerings. And then the corpses moved. Not much, just a twitch of fingers, a tilt of the head, but enough to make every man's blood run cold. Their mouths opened in unison, and the whispers returned, louder than ever. "You cannot leave. You are ours. The gate is open." The commander raised his rifle and fired, bullets tearing through the bodies, shredding them into lifeless heaps. But the voices didn't stop. They grew louder, filling the chamber until the men clutched their ears in agony, some dropping their weapons to claw at their own heads. "Run!" the commander shouted. His voice was ragged, barely human, but it broke through the noise. The men stumbled forward, past the fallen bodies, toward the faint sliver of light that marked the exit. Their boots slipped on ice. Their lungs burned from the cold. But ahead, finally, they saw it. The surface, the white glow of the Alaskan wilderness. They burst out into the blizzard, collapsing into the snow, gasping as the freezing air filled their lungs. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the wind howling across the barren ice. But then the ground shook again. The mountain roared behind them, a sound deeper than thunder, echoing across the frozen wasteland. The snow split in jagged cracks, steam and fire spewing upward, as if the earth itself was tearing open. The commander dragged himself to his feet, shouting over the storm, "Move! We can't stop here." His men rose with him, stumbling through knee-deep snow, their bodies weak, their minds fractured. They didn't know where they were going. The storm had erased all landmarks, and their compasses still spun uselessly in their hands. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty: they could never go back. And behind them, in the heart of the mountains, something vast and ancient finally stretched its wings. Snow whipped against their faces, stinging like shards of glass. The storm had grown worse in the time they'd been inside the mountain, and now it was a wall of white swallowing everything around them. The soldiers staggered forward blindly, their bodies shaking from exhaustion and terror, their minds still echoing with the voices from the tomb. They had escaped the cavern. They had escaped the pit, but the nightmare hadn't ended. The commander led the way, clutching his compass even though it spun uselessly in circles. Every landmark they might have recognized was gone, buried under waves of snow and shadow. Their radios hissed with static, their signals drowned in the storm. It was as if the world itself had been erased, leaving only them, the snow, and the thing that hunted them. Because something was following. At first, it was only a sound. A deep, rhythmic pounding, faint but steady, as if something massive moved beneath the ice. Then came the shadows, huge, fleeting shapes that flickered in the blizzard just out of sight. Every time the men turned, there was nothing there. But the feeling remained, heavy as the storm pressing down on them. They weren't alone. They hadn't been since the mountain. One soldier, Anderson, cracked first. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled through the snow, his eyes wild. "It's behind us," he screamed. "It's coming up from the ground." He fired his rifle blindly into the white bursts of fire lighting up the storm before vanishing again. The commander grabbed him, shaking him hard. "Hold it together, soldier. We move or we die." But even as he said it, the ground trembled beneath them. A long, low groan rose from deep within the ice, like the mountain's roar had followed them above ground. Cracks spiderwebbed across the snow, steam and heat rising in short bursts. The soldiers scrambled, climbing over drifts and fissures, each step more desperate than the last. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time had lost meaning in the endless storm. Their limbs were heavy, their eyes half closed from exhaustion. Some of the men began to stagger slower, falling behind. And that's when it happened. A scream. They turned to see one of their own, the youngest of them, being dragged into the snow. Not by hands, not by claws, but by the ground itself. The ice split beneath him, a black void opening in the whiteness, and he was yanked down before anyone could reach him. His rifle clattered on the surface, the sound muffled instantly by the storm. The commander shouted, rushing forward, but another soldier grabbed his arm. "No, we can save him." His voice broke with terror. "It sets the mountain, it sets still here." The ground sealed over, leaving no trace of what had happened. Just snow, just silence. The men stared, hearts pounding, realizing what it meant. The beast wasn't bound to the cavern. The mountain wasn't just its prison. The whole land was alive with it. They weren't running across Alaska. They were running across its body. Panic spread like fire. The soldiers ran harder, stumbling through the snow, their boots slipping on the shifting ice. Some fired into the storm, bullets vanishing into the white. Others prayed under their breath, words lost to the wind. But no matter how far they went, the sense of pursuit never faded. Night fell, or maybe the storm only grew darker. It was impossible to tell. The only light came from their dying flares in the faint glow of the northern sky, hidden and smothered by clouds. The men huddled together, forming a circle against the wind. "We can go on," one whispered. "We freeze out here. Better to go back, try to make peace with it." The commander Sip's voice was iron. "We don't go back, that Sip's not an option. We keep moving. If we stop, it takes us." But even he looked hollow. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale with cold. He knew the truth. They all did. None of them had the strength to keep going much longer. Then came the whispers again. Not from inside the mountain, not from inside their heads. This time it came from the storm itself. "Come back. You cannot leave. The gate is open." The snow swirled tighter, the wind carrying voices that sounded like their own comrades, the ones they'd lost. Some of the men sobbed, covering their ears. But the whispers grew louder, sharper, stabbing into their skulls no matter how they tried to block them out. And then, through the storm, they saw it. A shape, black and towering, barely visible in the whiteout. It was too large to be human, too jagged to be an animal. Its limbs were wrong, too many, bending at impossible angles. Its head scraped against the storm clouds, glowing eyes cutting through the blizzard like lanterns. The beast had followed them. The men broke. Some fired their rifles, screaming as they emptied their clips into the storm. The bullets vanished without a sound. Others ran, scattering in every direction, desperate to escape the glowing eyes. The commander roared over the chaos. "Stay together. Don't split up." But his voice was lost in the storm, swallowed by the howling wind and the deafening roar of the creature. One soldier fell to his knees, sobbing, "It won't let us leave. We'll never get out." He pulled the pin from his grenade, clutching it to his chest. The explosion lit the storm for an instant. A flash of fire swallowed almost immediately by the snow. When the smoke cleared, he was gone. No body, no trace. The others pressed on, stumbling blindly, their circle breaking apart with each step. The storm tore them away from each other, white walls rising between them until they were alone, each man swallowed by the blizzard. And in the silence that followed, each one heard the same thing. Footsteps, heavy, slow, and impossibly close. The beast wasn't behind them anymore. It was beside them. The storm swallowed them whole. Each soldier found himself alone, cut off from the others, the blizzard's white curtain rising like walls around them. The snow was so thick it felt alive, pressing in from every side. Every breath burned, every step sank deeper, and above it all was the sound, the slow, thunderous footsteps of something vast, something patient circling closer. The commander stumbled forward, clutching his rifle, though his fingers were nearly frozen stiff. He tried to call out to his men, but the storm ripped his voice away before it could carry more than a few feet. His heart hammered, not just from the cold, but from the knowledge that he could feel eyes on him, huge, unblinking eyes, watching from somewhere inside the storm. Elsewhere, one of the soldiers collapsed to his knees. His body shook with exhaustion. His lips cracked from cold. He pressed his hands to his ears, but the whispers still pierced through. Voices of the dead, voices of his friends, voices that sounded like his own. "Stay with us. The gate is open. You belong here now." He looked up and swore he saw the outline of his lost comrade, Anderson, the one dragged beneath the snow earlier. Anderson stood just beyond the storm, face pale, uniform shredded. His mouth opened in a silent scream, and then the figure dissolved into white. The soldier screamed too, but the sound never reached anyone else. The storm bent time. Hours stretched like days. The men no longer knew how far they'd gone, or whether they were circling in place. Some swore they saw lights ahead, faint, flickering glows like lanterns. They stumbled toward them with renewed hope, only to find they weren't lights at all, but the beast's glowing eyes. And then it revealed itself fully. From the wall of the storm, the creature emerged. It was taller than any tree, larger than any ship. Its body was made of shadow and stone, its limbs bending like broken bones, clawed feet sinking deep into the ice without leaving tracks. Its face, or what passed for one, shifted constantly, flickering between skulls, masks, and the hollow visages of the men themselves. Its eyes glowed an unnatural white, blinding in the darkness of the storm. The men froze in terror. One soldier fired his rifle, the sound deafening in the storm. Bullets sparked against the creature's form, ricocheting as if hitting rock. Another hurled a grenade, the explosion lighting the night, but when the smoke cleared, the beast hadn't moved an inch. It simply stood, watching, as though mocking their efforts. And then it roared. The sound wasn't just heard, it was felt vibrating through their bones, rattling their teeth. The ground shook, cracks splitting the ice. Snow and rock avalanched down nearby ridges. Some of the men dropped their weapons and ran, their panic overwhelming any training they had left. But there was nowhere to run. One by one, the soldiers vanished into the storm. Some were swallowed by sudden fissures in the ground, their screams fading as they were dragged into the darkness below. Others simply disappeared, their forms dissolving like smoke. The beast didn't even have to touch them. The land itself obeyed it. The commander refused to yield. Staggering, half-frozen, he pushed his way up a ridge, shouting for his men to follow. Only 2 soldiers remained close enough to hear him, their eyes wide with terror. Together they scrambled up the ice, the beast's footsteps shaking the ground behind them. At the top, the commander turned and looked back. The creature loomed at the base of the ridge, taller than the cliffs themselves. Its head tilted, its many faces flickering in the storm, and then in a voice that sounded like every soldier he had ever commanded, it spoke. "You open the gate. You cannot leave." The men froze, their hearts pounding in disbelief. They had never heard it speak before. Not clearly, not like this. It wasn't just a beast, it was something older, something that had been waiting beneath the mountain for longer than any nation had stood. The commander lifted his rifle, knowing it was useless. He fired anyway, each shot cracking in the storm. When the rifle clicked empty, he drew his sidearm, firing until it too clicked dry. The beast didn't move. It only watched. One of the remaining soldiers broke. He dropped his weapon and threw himself down the slope, screaming as he disappeared into the storm. The other soldier clutched a flare. His hands shaking, he lit it, the red glow casting long shadows across the snow. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice breaking. "Stay away from us." The beast didn't stay back. It raised one massive arm, and with a single sweep, the storm itself obeyed. The wind roared, the snow lifted, and the flare was snuffed out instantly, leaving nothing but blackness. The commander grabbed the last soldier Sip's arm, pulling him close. "Listen to me. We keep moving. Do you hear me? We don't stop." The soldier nodded, tears freezing on his cheeks. Together, they stumbled forward into the blizzard, away from the ridge, away from the beast's towering form. But deep down, the commander knew the truth. They weren't going to escape. For hours, or maybe minutes, they pressed on, until even their willpower gave out. The soldier collapsed first, face down in the snow, his body too weak to rise. The commander fell soon after, the storm closing over him like a shroud. His last sight was the faint glow of eyes in the distance, drawing closer, impossibly slow, as if savoring the moment. Then, silence. Days later, a search team was sent to find them. When the storm cleared, they found the outpost abandoned. The mountain cracked, the snow churned as if something massive had moved beneath it. But of the soldiers, there was no sign, no bodies, no gear, not even a footprint. The official report claimed the men had been lost in a sudden avalanche, classified, closed, forgotten. But the locals know better. They whisper of the cursed mountain, of the tomb that was never meant to be opened. They say the soldiers were taken, claimed by something older than history, something that waits beneath the ice. And sometimes, on the darkest nights, when the storm howls across the ridges, they swear you can still hear them. The voices of the lost, calling out, begging you not to enter. Because once you step inside, there's no coming back.